The winter of 1882 was particularly cruel to the Montana Territory. Wind howled across the frozen plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it sheets of snow that could blind a man in seconds. The mountains in the distance stood like gray sentinels, their peaks lost in the perpetual gloom of December storms. Samuel McCarty sat hunched before his fireplace, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind batter his cabin walls. The whiskey bottle at his elbow was nearly empty. The third this week. He lifted it to his lips, taking another pull of the amber liquid that no longer burned going down. It had been 4 years since Margaret died, 4 years since the fever took her, and the whiskey had long since lost its power to chase away the cold that had settled into his bones. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault of the storm. It was a modest structure, built with his own hands when he and Margaret had first claimed this patch of land. 2 rooms, a main area with the fireplace, table, and kitchen, and a small bedroom where he now slept alone. The walls were adorned with little beyond the necessities: a rifle above the mantel, some tools hanging from pegs, and a single photograph in a tarnished frame that he couldn't bear to look at anymore. Outside, his cattle huddled together in the lean-to barn, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. 30 head, all that remained of what had once been a promising herd. The ranch had prospered when Margaret was alive. She had a way with the animals, a gentleness that calmed even the most obstinate steer. Now they were just beasts to be fed and watered, counted and sold. Sam poured the last of the whiskey into his glass, held it up to the firelight, and watched the liquid glow like liquid gold. He remembered how Margaret used to scold him for drinking too much, her hands on her hips, that stern look that couldn't quite hide the love in her eyes. "Samuel McCarty," she'd say, "that bottle won't solve your problems." She'd been right then. She'd be right now. The memories came unbidden, as they always did on nights like this. Margaret in her wedding dress, laughing as they danced at the harvest social, Margaret kneading bread in the morning light, flour dusting her arms, Margaret lying pale and fevered in their bed, her hand growing cold in his as the sickness took her. He'd buried her on the hill overlooking the ranch, under the lone oak tree where they used to sit and watch the sun set. A sudden sound cut through his reverie, something beyond the wind and snow. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt .45 on the table beside him. Living alone on the frontier had taught him caution. Wolves sometimes came down from the mountains in winter, desperate and hungry. Or worse, men with similar appetites. The sound came again, a thud against the door, followed by what might have been a voice. Sam stood slowly, his joints protesting after hours in the chair. He tucked the revolver into his belt and moved to the window, peering through the frost-covered glass. The storm had turned the world into a swirling white void. Another thud, weaker this time. Sam unbarred the door and cracked it open, squinting against the driving snow. A dark shape lay crumpled on his porch. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, holstering his gun and kneeling beside the figure. It was a woman, her clothes torn and ice-crusted, her face hidden by tangled dark hair. She was unconscious but breathing, her body shivering violently. Sam didn't hesitate. Whatever she was doing out in this storm, she'd die if left outside. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed less than a yearling calf, and carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. He laid her on the rug before the fireplace and got his first good look at her. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 30 years to his 42. Her dress, though torn and dirty, had once been of decent quality, store-bought, not homemade. Her face, even drawn with exhaustion and cold, held a beauty that was both delicate and fierce. Dark lashes rested against pale cheeks, and her lips had taken on a dangerous blue tinge. Sam had seen enough people freeze to death to know she needed warmth, and quickly. He grabbed blankets from the bedroom, wrapping them around her before adding more wood to the fire. Her boots were soaked through, her feet like ice when he pulled them off. He rubbed them briskly, trying to restore circulation, then wrapped them in strips torn from an old shirt. As he worked, he noticed other details. Her hands were calloused. She was no stranger to hard work. A faded bruise colored her left cheekbone. No wedding ring, though there was a pale band of skin where one might have been. The hem of her dress was muddy and torn, as if she'd been walking for miles. She stirred as the warmth began to penetrate, her eyes fluttering open. They were gray, like the storm outside, and for a moment they stared at him with wild fear. "Easy," Sam said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. Found you outside in the storm." She tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. Sam fetched water, helping her sit up enough to drink. She sipped slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice hoarse. She had an accent he couldn't quite place, not quite Eastern, but educated. "What were you doing out in this weather?" Sam asked. "Nearest town's 15 miles east." She looked away, into the fire. "Walking? In a blizzard?" "I had no choice." Her jaw tightened, and Sam recognized the look of someone running from something or someone. He didn't press. The frontier was full of people with secrets, himself included. "Well, you're welcome to stay until the storm passes. Can't send anyone back out in this?" She nodded, pulling the blankets tighter. I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Sam found himself studying her profile in the firelight. There was something about her, a strength beneath the exhaustion, a pride that hadn't been broken despite whatever had driven her into the storm. "I'm Sam McCarty," he said finally. "This is my ranch." "Eleanor," she replied after a pause. "Eleanor Hartley. Well, Miss Hartley. You must be hungry. Got some stew I can heat up." "Mrs. Hartley," she corrected quietly. "Or was, and thank you, but I don't want to impose." Sam stood, joints creaking again. "Ain't no imposition. Been eating alone so long. I've probably forgotten my table manners anyway." As he moved to the kitchen area, he caught her looking around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the photograph on the mantel, the general air of a place where a woman's touch had been long absent. "You live here alone?" she asked. "I do now." The words came out harder than he'd intended. She seemed to understand, nodding slowly. They were alike in that way. He realized. Both of them marked by loss. Both of them alone in a world that didn't much care for solitary souls. The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, for the first time in 4 years, Sam McCarty felt something besides the cold emptiness that had become his constant companion. It wasn't warmth exactly, not yet, but perhaps the promise of it, like embers buried deep in ash, waiting for the right breath of air to spark back to life. The stew was simple fare, beef, potatoes, and whatever vegetables had survived in the root cellar, but Eleanor ate it like it was a feast. Sam watched her from across the rough-hewn table, noting how she held her spoon with a delicate grip despite her obvious hunger, how she dabbed at her mouth with the cloth he'd given her. Breeding showed, even in desperation. "Been walking long?" he asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. She paused, considering. 3 days, maybe 4. I lost track. From Billings? Further east, Bozeman. Sam whistled low. That was near 50 miles in good weather. In this storm, it was nothing short of miraculous she'd survived. Must have been powerful motivation to attempt that journey. Eleanor's gray eyes met his briefly before returning to her bowl. Sometimes staying is worse than any storm. He understood that kind of running. After Margaret died, he'd thought about leaving everything behind, heading further west where the memories couldn't follow. Only stubborn pride and the promise he'd made to her had kept him here. "You got people expecting you somewhere?" he asked. "No." The word came out flat, final. I worked at the Riverside Hotel, in the kitchen. The owner, Mr. Garrison, She trailed off, her knuckles white around the spoon. "When I refused his advances, he made certain I'd find no other employment in town. Said I was a thief, spread lies. No decent establishment would hire me after that." Sam felt anger stir in his chest. He'd known men like that, those who used their power to prey on those who had none. So you lit out on foot? I had a little money saved, took the stage as far as it would carry me, then started walking. Thought I might find work in one of the mining camps further west. She gave a bitter laugh. Didn't count on the storm. Mining camps ain't no place for a woman alone, Sam said carefully. Especially not a... He gestured vaguely, trying to find words that wouldn't offend. A lady of refinement. Eleanor's smile was sharp. I'm no lady. Mr. McCarty. Ladies don't scrub floors and haul water for 12 hours a day. Ladies don't get thrown out in the cold for protecting their virtue. She set down her spoon with deliberate care. I'm just a woman trying to survive. Nothing refined about that. The bitterness in her voice spoke of wounds deeper than just recent events. Sam recognized it, the same tone he heard in his own voice when he let his guard down. Where's Mr. Hartley? He asked quietly. Her shoulders tensed. Dead. 3 years now. Caught a bullet in a card game in Denver. Left me with debts I'm still trying to pay. She looked up at him then, chin raised in defiance. So you see, Mr. McCarty, you've taken in quite the scandalous guest. A widow with debts, thrown out of her position, traveling alone. I imagine your neighbors would have much to say about that. Don't got neighbors close enough to notice, Sam replied. And those that might wouldn't dare say it to my face. The defiance in her expression cracked slightly, replaced by something that might have been gratitude or relief. The storm continued to rage outside, wind driving snow against the windows with a sound like thrown sand. The cabin, for all its modest size, felt like the only warm place left in the world. I'll leave as soon as the weather clears. Eleanor said, I don't want to bring you trouble. Where exactly would you go? Sam asked. Storm like this could last days. Roads won't be passable for a week, maybe more. And even if they were, you got no supplies, no proper winter clothes, no horse. I'll manage. I always have. Like you managed walking 50 miles in a blizzard. She flinched at that, and Sam immediately regretted his harsh tone. What I mean is, he said more gently, ain't no shame in accepting help when you need it. Lord knows we all need it sometimes. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, staring into her empty bowl. What do you want in return? The question was asked softly, but Sam heard the steel beneath it. Nothing, he said firmly. I ain't that kind of man. She studied his face, searching for deception. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because some of the tension eased from her shoulders. I can work, she said. I won't be a burden. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm good with animals too. Grew up on a farm in Ohio before. She waved a hand. Before life led me elsewhere. Sam looked around the cabin, seeing it suddenly through her eyes, dust on every surface, dishes piled in the dry sink, clothes hanging haphazardly from pegs. Margaret would have been mortified. Place could use a woman's touch, he admitted. Been letting things slide. Your wife? Eleanor asked gently, glancing at the photograph on the mantel. Margaret, fever took her 4 years back. The words still hurt to say. We built this place together. Never seemed right to keep it up proper without her. Eleanor rose and moved to the fireplace, studying the photograph. Margaret smiled back at her, frozen in time, young and vibrant in her Sunday best. She was beautiful. Eleanor said, She was everything, Sam corrected. Smart, tough, gentle when it mattered. Could birth a calf in the morning and bake bread that'd make you weep in the afternoon. He stopped, embarrassed by his rambling. Eleanor returned to the table, her expression thoughtful. She was lucky to be so loved. I was the lucky one. They sat in companionable silence as Sam cleared the dishes. Eleanor tried to help, but he waved her off. You need rest. Take the bedroom. I'll bunk out here by the fire. I couldn't. Ain't up for debate. What kind of man would I be, making an exhausted woman sleep on the floor? She seemed to recognize the futility of arguing. Thank you, Mr. McCarty, for everything. Sam, he said. Just Sam. Then I'm Eleanor, or Ellie, if you prefer. As she headed for the bedroom, Sam noticed her slight limp, the careful way she moved. The walk had taken more out of her than she was letting on. He made a mental note to check those feet again in the morning. Make sure frostbite hadn't set in. Sam? She paused in the doorway. Why did you help me? Really? You don't know me. I could be lying about everything. He considered the question, staring into the fire. Because once upon a time, someone helped me when I needed it. And because... He stopped, unsure how to articulate the rest. Because the empty cabin had been slowly killing him. Because for the first time in 4 years, he'd felt something other than numbness when he'd carried her inside. Because it was the right thing to do. He finished simply. Eleanor nodded, seeming to understand there was more he wasn't saying. Good night, Sam. Good night, Ellie. After she'd closed the bedroom door, Sam settled into his chair by the fire with a fresh bottle of whiskey. But for once, he didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, he found himself listening to the small sounds of another person in his space, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of blankets, the soft sigh as she settled into bed. The storm outside seemed less fierce somehow, the cold less penetrating. The cabin didn't feel quite so much like a tomb. He thought about Eleanor's question. Why had he helped her? The answer he'd given was true enough, but not complete. The real truth was simpler and more complex, in her exhausted face and defiant eyes. He'd recognized a kindred spirit, someone else hollowed out by loss, fighting to keep going when it would be easier to stop. Maybe that's what the frontier did, stripped people down to their essential selves, brought together those who might never have met in civilized society. Out here, the normal rules didn't apply. A rancher could shelter a disgraced woman, and no one had to know or care. Sam finally poured himself a drink, but found he didn't much want it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the whiskey held no appeal. The warmth in the cabin wasn't coming from the bottle or even the fire. It was coming from the knowledge that he wasn't alone tonight, that somewhere in the darkness, another human being was sleeping under his roof, trusting him to keep her safe. It wasn't love or even affection. Not yet, but it was connection. And for a man who'd spent 4 years talking to cattle and ghosts, that was enough. The blizzard howled on, but inside the cabin, 2 broken souls had found temporary shelter from more than just the storm. The storm broke on the 3rd day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay thick as a man's waist across the ranch, sculpting the familiar landscape into something alien and beautiful. Sam stood on the porch, squinting against the brilliant morning sun, and wondered how long it would take to dig a path to the barn. Behind him, he heard Eleanor, Ellie, moving about the kitchen. She'd been true to her word about working. In just 2 days, she'd brought more order to the cabin than Sam had managed in 4 years. The floors were swept, the windows cleaned of their film of soot and neglect, and the smell of fresh bread now competed with the usual odors of leather and wood smoke. "Coffee's ready," she called, and Sam felt that strange flutter in his chest again. Such a simple thing, having someone else make coffee, but it had unmade him yesterday morning when he'd woken to find it waiting. He stomped the snow from his boots and went inside. Ellie stood by the stove, her borrowed shirt, one of Margaret's he'd finally been able to unpack, tucked into a pair of his old trousers cinched tight with rope. Her dark hair was pinned up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. She looked nothing like Margaret, yet somehow she fit into the space as if she'd always belonged there. "I'll need to check the kettle," Sam said, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. "See how many made it through. I'll come with you." When he started to protest, she raised a hand. "I told you, I'm good with animals, and I need to earn my keep." Sam wanted to tell her she didn't need to earn anything, but he'd learned that Ellie's pride was as essential to her as breathing. "All right, but you'll need better clothes. Can't have you freezing again." He dug out more of Margaret's things, a heavy coat, thick gloves, a wool scarf. Ellie fingered the coat's buttons, a question in her eyes. "She'd want them used," Sam said gruffly. "No sense letting moths have them." They worked side by side in companionable silence, breaking a path to the barn with shovels and determination. The cattle had huddled together for warmth, and while a few looked worse for wear, all 30 head had survived. Ellie moved among them with confident hands, checking eyes and noses, running her palms along their hides. "This one's got the start of shipping fever," she said, indicating a young steer. "See how he's standing apart? And his nose is running. We should separate him before it spreads." Sam stared at her. "You know cattle diseases?" "I told you I grew up on a farm. My father raised Herefords before—" She trailed off, that familiar shadow crossing her face. "Before he lost everything in the panic of '73. They isolated the sick steer, and Ellie mixed up a remedy from Sam's meager medical supplies, things he'd forgotten he even had. As she worked, she hummed softly, a melody Sam didn't recognize but found soothing. "You're full of surprises. Ellie Hartley," he said. She glanced up at him, a smile playing at her lips. "A woman has to be, to survive out here." That evening, after a dinner of beef stew, flavored with herbs Ellie had found in forgotten corners of the kitchen, they sat by the fire. Sam had brought out his whiskey bottle from habit, but it sat untouched between them. He found he didn't need it. Ellie's presence was intoxicating enough. "Can I ask you something?" Ellie said, staring into the flames. "Shoot. Why did you stay? After your wife died, this place must be full of memories." Sam considered the question. "Thought about leaving. Nearly did, once or twice, but Margaret's buried on that hill out there. Felt like abandoning her. To go." He paused. "Truth is, I've been a ghost haunting my own life, going through the motions but not really living." "I understand that," Ellie said softly. "After James died, my husband, I kept expecting him to walk through the door, kept setting his place at the table. It took months before I could stop." She drew her knees up to her chest, making herself small. "The debts were almost a relief. Gave me something else to focus on besides the emptiness." They sat quietly, two people who understood the peculiar weight of absence. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, their calls echoing across the frozen land. "I should tell you," Ellie said suddenly, "about James, about why I don't mourn him the way you mourn Margaret." Sam waited, sensing this was important. He wasn't a kind man, charming when he wanted something, cruel when he didn't get it. The gambling was just part of it. He had other appetites, too. Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, and Sam understood there were bruises in her past that had nothing to do with falling. "I'm sorry," Sam said, meaning it. "No woman deserves that. I thought I did. For a long time. I thought I did." She looked at him then, eyes bright with unshed tears. "When he died, I felt, God help me, I felt relieved. What kind of woman does that make me?" "A survivor," Sam said firmly. "Nothing more, nothing less." Something shifted in her expression then. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "You're a good man. Sam McCarty. Just a man," he corrected. "Trying to do right when I can." She stood abruptly, wiping at her eyes. "I found something today, when I was cleaning. Want to show you." She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a small wooden box Sam recognized with a jolt. Margaret's sewing box. "Thought you might want to go through this," Ellie said gently. "Seems a shame to let such fine work go unused." Sam opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside were Margaret's needles and threads, scraps of fabric, and half-finished projects, a quilt square, an embroidered handkerchief. The sight of them brought back a flood of memories. Margaret sitting by this very fire, needle flashing in the lamplight, talking about their plans for the future. "She was making that quilt for a baby," Sam said hoarsely. "We'd been trying. She lost 3 before the fever took her too." Ellie's hand covered his, warm and steady. "I'm sorry. I couldn't look at any of it after. Just packed it away." He fingered the quilt square, tracing Margaret's neat stitches. "Stupid, probably." "Not stupid. Necessary." Ellie squeezed his hand. "But maybe now? Maybe it's time to let some light back in." Sam looked at her then, really looked at her. The firelight caught the silver threads in her dark hair, highlighted the strength in her jaw, the compassion in her eyes. She wasn't Margaret, would never be Margaret. But she was real and alive, and here, maybe it is. He agreed. Later that night, as Sam made up his bed by the fire, he heard Ellie crying softly in the bedroom. Not the desperate sobs of fresh grief, but the quiet tears of someone letting go of old pain. He wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but instinct held him back. Some sorrows needed to be faced alone. Instead, he lay in the dancing shadows and thought about the strange turns life took. A week ago, he'd been alone with his whiskey and ghosts. Now there was a woman in his house who knew about cattle and herbs, who made coffee in the morning and brought light to dusty corners. For the first time in 4 years, Sam McCarty fell asleep without reaching for the bottle. The warmth he felt had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with the knowledge that tomorrow he wouldn't wake up alone. The wind outside had gentled to a whisper, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Not a morning sound, but a greeting to the night, life. Sam thought as sleep took him, had a way of surprising you when you'd given up expecting anything at all. 2 weeks had passed since the storm, and the roads to Millfield were finally clear enough to attempt the journey. Sam hitched up the wagon, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. They needed supplies, flour, coffee, ammunition, but he knew the real challenge wouldn't be the muddy roads or the cold. "I could stay here," Ellie offered, reading his mood. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in Margaret's shawl. "Make a list of what you need." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "You're not hiding." "We're not hiding. You've done nothing wrong." She smiled at that, a sad little twist of her lips. "The world doesn't much care about right and wrong when it comes to women like me. Then the world can go to hell." The trip to town took 3 hours through snow and mud. Ellie sat beside him on the wagon's seat, her back straight, chin high. She'd put on her best dress, the one she'd arrived in, now clean and mended, and pinned her hair up properly. Sam thought she looked like a queen heading into battle. Millfield wasn't much of a town. 1 main street, a handful of businesses, maybe 200 souls on a good day. But it had what they needed: a general store, a saloon, a church, and more importantly, a population with strong opinions about everything and everyone. They felt the eyes as soon as they rolled down Main Street. Curtains twitched. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Sam helped Ellie down from the wagon with deliberate care, making sure everyone saw the respectful distance he kept. "I'll get the supplies," he said. "Won't take but a minute." "I'm coming with you." Her gray eyes flashed. "I won't skulk in the wagon like I've done something shameful." The bell above Hartman's general store jangled as they entered. Mrs. Hartman, a narrow woman with a face like curdled milk, looked up from her ledger. Her expression soured further when she saw Ellie. "Sam McCarty," she said, ignoring Ellie entirely. "Haven't seen you in town for weeks." "Been snowed in," Sam replied evenly. "Need the usual supplies, and some fabric, if you got it, and women's boots, size." He glanced at Ellie. 7, Ellie supplied. "Meeting Mrs." Hartman stared steadily. "I see." "Mrs." Hartman's tone could have frozen water. "And who might this be?" "This is Mrs. Hartley," Sam said. "She's helping out at the ranch." "Helping?" The word dripped with insinuation. "How charitable of you, Mr. McCarty, taking in a stranger, a woman alone." Before Sam could respond, Ellie stepped forward. "Indeed, Mr. McCarty saved my life during the blizzard. I'd have frozen to death without his Christian kindness." She smiled sweetly. "I'm sure you would have done the same." "Mrs. Hartman, any decent person would." The challenge hung in the air. "Mrs." Hartman's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Other customers had drifted closer, pretending to examine goods while obviously eavesdropping. "Of course, Mrs." Hartman finally managed. "Though most decent women wouldn't be traveling alone in blizzards. Most decent women haven't been widowed and left destitute," Ellie replied calmly. "But then, I suppose you've been fortunate enough never to face such trials. Sam fought to hide a smile. Ellie was handling the old biddy better than he ever could. They completed their purchases in tense silence. As they loaded the wagon, Sam noticed more townspeople had emerged, standing in small groups, whispering. The men looked curious. The women, disapproving. "One more stop," Sam said, guiding Ellie toward the saloon. "Sam, I can't go in there." "Not inside. Wait here." He positioned her by the wagon, in full view of the street, then pushed through the saloon doors. The silver dollar was dim and smoky, filled with the usual collection of ranch hands and drifters. Conversation stuttered to a halt as Sam entered. "Well, well," called out Jake Morrison from the bar. Jake owned the spread next to Sam's, though neighbor was a loose term when 5 miles separated their properties. "Heard you had company out your way, McCarty." "News travels fast," Sam said neutrally. "Pretty piece of company, from what I see." Jake gestured toward the window where Ellie was visible. "Where'd you find her?" "Nearly frozen on my porch in the storm. Would have died if I hadn't taken her in." "Bet she's real grateful," another man snickered. "Real warm and grateful." Sam moved before he'd even made the conscious decision. His fist connected with the man's jaw, sending him sprawling into a table. Glasses shattered. Men scrambled back. "Anyone else got something to say about Mrs. Hartley?" Sam's hand rested on his Colt. "Because I'm happy to discuss it further." The saloon was silent except for the groaning of the man on the floor. Jake held up his hands peacefully. "No offense meant. Sam, just surprised is all. You've been alone so long." "I'm still alone," Sam said firmly. "Mrs. Hartley is working for room and board. Nothing more. Anyone suggests otherwise, they'll answer to me." He surveyed the room, meeting each man's eyes until they looked away. Then he turned and walked out, leaving silence in his wake. Ellie was surrounded by 3 women when he emerged, trapped against the wagon. He recognized them. The church ladies, led by Reverend Watson's wife. "Quite improper, Mrs." Watson was saying. "An unmarried woman living with a man, widowed," Ellie corrected, "and working for fair wages. The appearance of impropriety is just as damaging as ladies." Sam's voice cut through their chatter. "Mrs. Hartley's arrangements are no one's business but hers and mine. Now, if you'll excuse us. Mr. McCarty, Mrs." Watson drew herself up. "We're only concerned for everyone's reputation, yours included. What would dear Margaret think?" Sam went very still. Ellie's hand touched his arm lightly, restraining. "Margaret," Sam said slowly, "would think that turning away someone in need was the greatest sin of all. She'd be ashamed of anyone who'd let another human being freeze to death for the sake of appearances." "Mrs." Watson's face flushed. "Well, I never—" "No," Sam agreed. "You never— Good day, ladies." He helped Ellie into the wagon and climbed up beside her. As they rolled out of town, he could feel the weight of all those watching eyes. "I'm sorry," Ellie said quietly. "I've brought you trouble, just as I feared. Nothing I can't handle." "They'll talk. Your reputation." "My reputation," Sam laughed bitterly. "I'm the hermit who drinks too much and talks to graves." "What reputation?" They rode in silence for a while. Then Ellie asked, "Why did you hit that man?" "He insulted you." "You barely know me." Sam considered this. "I know enough. I know you work hard. I know you're kind to animals and make the best cornbread I've ever tasted. I know you've been knocked down by life but got back up." He glanced at her. "That's worth defending." Ellie was quiet for so long he thought she might not respond. Then she said, "No one's defended me in a very long time." "Well," Sam said gruffly, "get used to it." As they approached the ranch, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered land in shades of gold and pink. The cabin looked warm and welcoming, smoke rising from the chimney. "It's beautiful," Ellie said softly. "I didn't notice before, when I was so cold, but it's beautiful here." "Margaret always said the same thing." The mention of his wife's name didn't hurt as much as usual. Said this land had good bones. That night, after a quiet supper, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. But something had shifted. The confrontations in town had forced things into the open that had been simmering beneath the surface. "They're not entirely wrong. You know," Ellie said suddenly, "the townspeople, this situation, it's not proper." Sam set down his untouched glass of whiskey. "You thinking of leaving?" "I'm thinking I don't want to hurt you. You've been nothing but kind, and I'm repaying that by damaging your standing in the community." "To hell with the community. You don't mean that. You have to live here, do business with these people." Sam stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the moon had risen, casting silver light across the snow. "4 years," he said. "4 years I've just existed, going through the motions, drowning everything in whiskey. Then you show up, and suddenly I care about things again. The house is clean, the coffee's hot, there's laughter." He turned to face her. "You think I give a damn what Millfield thinks about that?" Ellie rose too, moving closer but not touching. "Sam, stay," he said simply. "Whatever they say, whatever they think, stay." She studied his face in the firelight. "As your housekeeper? As whatever you want to be?" The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Then Ellie smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed her face. "Then I'll stay," she said, "and let them talk." Sam smiled back, feeling something ease in his chest. "Let them talk," he agreed. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside the cabin, 2 souls who'd found each other against all odds sat by the fire, no longer alone. The thunder of hooves woke Sam from a dead sleep. He was on his feet, rifle in hand, before his mind fully registered what he was hearing. Multiple horses riding hard. At 3 a.m. That meant nothing good. "Sam!" Ellie appeared in the bedroom doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "What is it?" "Get dressed, quick, then get the shotgun from above the mantel." She didn't argue, disappearing back into the room. Sam pulled on his boots and coat, checking his ammunition. Through the window, he could see torches, 5, maybe 6 riders approaching fast. They'd been living in relative peace for a month since the trip to town. The gossip had died down some, though certain people still crossed the street when they saw Ellie coming. Sam had thought they'd weathered the worst of it. He should have known better. The riders pulled up in front of the cabin, horses steaming in the cold night air. Sam recognized the lead man, Bill Garrett, a drifter who'd been hanging around Millfield's saloon lately. The others were strangers, hard-looking men with the unmistakable bearing of those who lived outside the law. Sam stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his hands but ready. "Little late for a social call, boys." Garrett grinned, teeth flashing in the torchlight. "Heard you got yourself a woman, McCarty. Thought we'd come see for ourselves. Turn around and ride out. Now. Now that ain't neighborly." Garrett dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. "See, me and the boys been riding hard. Could use some hospitality. Food, coffee, company." The other men laughed, an ugly sound in the darkness. Sam's finger found the rifle's trigger. "Only thing you'll get here is buried. Move on. 6 of us. 1 of you." Garrett took a step closer. "Maybe you should think about—" The blast of the shotgun from the doorway cut him off. Ellie had fired into the air, but the message was clear. She pumped the action, chambering another shell. "2 of us," she said calmly, "and I don't miss twice." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett laughed. "Feisty little thing, ain't she? I like that in a woman. The lady told you to leave." Sam said, "I won't ask again." One of the mounted men leaned forward. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Garrett's eyes never left Ellie. "Tell you what, McCarty, we'll make you a deal. Share the woman. We leave peaceful. Keep being unfriendly. Well," he shrugged, "your barn sure would burn pretty." Sam shot him. The rifle crack split the night. Garrett spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. The other men went for their guns, but Sam was already moving. diving behind the water trough as bullets splintered the porch rail. Ellie dropped back inside, the doorframe providing cover. "The barn!" One of the outlaws shouted. "Get to the barn!" Two riders broke off, heading for the structure. If they set it ablaze, the cattle would die, and with them, any chance Sam had of making it through the winter. Ellie appeared at the window, firing the shotgun. One of the riders tumbled from his saddle. The other made it to the barn, and Sam saw the flare of a match. "Cover me!" Sam broke from cover, sprinting across the yard. A bullet tugged at his coat. Another whined past his ear. But Ellie was firing steadily now, having grabbed his spare rifle, forcing the outlaws to keep their heads down. Sam burst into the barn as the outlaw was trying to light a pile of hay. They collided, rolling in the dirt, fists flying. The man was younger, stronger, but Sam fought with the desperation of someone with everything to lose. He managed to get on top, slamming the outlaw's head against a post until the man went limp. Outside, the gunfire had intensified. Sam grabbed the unconscious man's pistol and ran back out. Two of the outlaws were down, including Garrett, who was crawling toward his horse. The remaining two had taken cover behind the well. Then Sam saw something that made his blood freeze. Jake Morrison and 3 other ranchers were riding hard up the road, rifles out. "Thought you might need help, McCarty," Jake called, opening fire on the outlaw's position, caught between 2 forces. The remaining outlaws broke. One made a run for his horse and was cut down. The other threw down his gun, hands high. "Don't shoot. I surrender." It was over in minutes. The yard looked like a battlefield, bodies scattered, horses milling nervously, gun smoke hanging in the cold air. Sam's hands were shaking as the adrenaline faded. "Everyone all right?" Jake dismounted, surveying the scene. "We're fine." Sam looked back at the cabin where Ellie stood in the doorway, rifle still in hand. "How did you know?" "Saw these boys in town earlier, asking questions about you. Didn't like their look. Figured I'd keep watch, just in case." Jake grinned. "Good thing, too. Though looks like you and the missus had it pretty well handled." "She's not," Sam started, then stopped. "Thanks, Jake. I owe you. No debt between neighbors." Jake's expression grew serious. "Though maybe it's time you made an honest woman of her. Sam, would solve a lot of problems." Sam didn't answer, moving to check on Ellie instead. She was pale but steady, a bruise forming on her shoulder from the shotgun's recoil. "You all right?" "I'm fine." She looked past him at the bodies in the yard. "Are they?" "Some are dead. Others will hang." Sam touched her face gently. "You saved my life. Our lives. I wasn't going to let them—" Her voice broke. "I've run enough. I'm done running." The next hours were a blur. The sheriff arrived from town, taking statements and the surviving outlaws into custody. The dead were loaded onto a wagon. By dawn, the yard was cleared, though bloodstains still marked the ground. Jake lingered after the others left. "This won't be the last of it," he said quietly. "Men like Garrett, they got friends, and a woman like that," he nodded toward the cabin. "She'll always draw attention, wanted or not." "I know. So what are you going to do about it?" Sam watched Ellie through the window. She was making coffee, moving around the kitchen as if gunfights in the yard were an everyday occurrence. Strong, capable. "I'm gonna marry her," Sam said, "if she'll have me." Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "About damn time. Margaret would approve. You know, she'd hate seeing you alone." After Jake left, Sam found Ellie sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. He sat beside her, close but not touching. "I'm sorry," he said. "This happened because of me, because I couldn't leave well enough alone in town." "No." Ellie turned to face him. "This happened because there are evil men in the world who think they can take what they want." She touched the bruise on her shoulder. "But they learned different, didn't they?" "That they did." Sam took a breath. "Ellie, I need to ask you something." She waited, gray eyes steady on his. "I know we haven't known each other long, And I know I'm not much of a catch, older, set in my ways. Still probably drink too much, but— Sam, Ellie put a finger to his lips. Are you trying to propose? He nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. Then do it proper. Sam slid off the chair onto one knee, taking her hand. Eleanor Hartley, will you marry me? Not because of what people think or for protection, but because— He struggled for the words. Because you brought me back to life. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel colder than any winter. Because I love you. Tears tracked down Ellie's cheeks. You hardly know me. I know enough. I'm not Margaret. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to be Ellie. To be yourself, with me. For as long as we have. She was quiet for so long, Sam's knee started to ache. Then she smiled, that radiant smile that transformed her whole face. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Sam McCarty. I'll marry you. He kissed her then, their first kiss, gentle and careful and full of promise, when they broke apart. Ellie laughed shakily. Though you might regret it, I can't seem to go anywhere without attracting trouble. Then we'll face it together. Sam stood, pulling her up with him. No more running, no more hiding, just us, here, building something worth defending. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The bloodstains in the yard would fade, the bullet holes could be patched. What they'd found in each other, that was what would endure. I love you too, Ellie whispered against his chest. I didn't think I could, after everything, but I do. Sam held her close, feeling the last of the ice around his heart finally melt away. The whiskey bottle sat forgotten on the shelf. He didn't need it anymore. He had something far better to keep him warm. The courthouse in Millfield was a squat brick building that smelled of old paper and righteousness. Sam stood beside Ellie in the judge's chambers, both of them dressed in their best clothes, which wasn't saying much after the events of recent weeks. Judge Harrison, a stern man with steel-gray whiskers, peered at them over his spectacles. Mr. McCarty, Mrs. Hartley, the judge began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Before we proceed with this marriage, there are matters requiring address. Sam felt Ellie tense beside him. They'd expected this. Word of the shootout had spread through the territory like wildfire, and with it, renewed speculation about their relationship. Your Honor, Marshal Tom Bradley stepped forward. He'd arrived from the territorial capital 2 days prior, investigating the deaths at Sam's ranch. I need to question Mrs. Hartley about her past associations. What associations? Sam demanded. Bradley consulted his notebook. Got a wire from Bozeman. Seems Mrs. Hartley left town under questionable circumstances. Mr. Garrison, her former employer, claims she stole from him. That's a lie, Ellie's voice rang out, sharp and clear. Harrison made advances I refused, so he— You'll have your chance to speak. Judge Harrison interrupted. Marshal, continue. There's also the matter of her late husband, James Hartley. Man had considerable debts in Denver, some to unsavory characters. They might come looking for payment. Sam stepped forward. Whatever debts existed died with James Hartley. The law's clear on that. Unless she benefited from his criminal activities. Bradley countered. Their suggestion he was involved in claim jumping before his death. The judge raised a hand for silence. Mrs. Hartley, these are serious allegations. What say you? Ellie lifted her chin, meeting the judge's gaze steadily. James was no saint. Your Honor, he gambled, drank, and yes, probably cheated men at cards. But I knew nothing of his business dealings. I was trying to survive a bad marriage. Nothing more. Her voice grew stronger. As for Mr. Garrison, he's a predator who uses his position to prey on desperate women. When I refused him, he ensured I'd find no decent work in Bozeman. I fled because staying meant starvation or worse. Can you prove these claims? Can he prove his? Ellie shot back. Where's the stolen money? Where are these criminal proceeds? I left Bozeman with the clothes on my back and coach fare. Does that sound like a successful thief? Judge Harrison studied her for a long moment. "Marshal, do you have evidence beyond Mr. Garrison's word?" Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "No, sir, just the allegations." "Then I see no reason to delay these proceedings." The judge's expression softened slightly. "However, Mrs. Hartley, you should know that marrying Mr. McCarty won't shield you if evidence emerges later." "I'm not marrying him for protection," Ellie said firmly. "I'm marrying him because I love him." The judge nodded, then turned his attention to the small crowd that had gathered, townspeople who'd pushed their way in, claiming various reasons for needing to witness the proceedings. "Now then," Judge Harrison said loudly, "if anyone has legitimate cause why these two should not be wed, speak now." Mrs. Watson stood up, her face pinched with disapproval. "Your Honor, this woman appeared from nowhere, has lived in sin with Mr. McCarty, and brought violence to our community. She's clearly a corrupting influence." "Living in sin?" Sam's voice was dangerously quiet. "She worked for room and board. Nothing more, until I proposed after the attack. Unless you have proof otherwise, the impropriety alone is not legal grounds to prevent marriage." Judge Harrison cut in. "Anything else?" "What about Margaret?" another woman called out. "It's only been 4 years. It's indecent." Sam turned to face the crowd. "My wife is buried on that hill, and I'll mourn her until I die. But she's gone, and she'd be the first to tell me that living is for the living." His voice grew hard. "Anyone who thinks they know better than me about what Margaret would want can meet me outside after this is done." "That's enough," Judge Harrison commanded. "This is a court of law, not a church social—" "Mrs. Watson, unless you have legal objection, sit down." She sat, but her expression promised this wasn't over. The judge continued with the ceremony, his words formal and binding. When he reached the vows, Sam took Ellie's hands, feeling them tremble slightly. "Eleanor," he said, ignoring the crowd, focusing only on her gray eyes. "I promise to protect you, provide for you, and stand beside you against whatever comes. You saved me from drowning in grief and gave me reason to live again. I'll spend whatever years I have left trying to be worthy of that gift." Ellie's eyes shimmered with tears. "Samuel, you gave me shelter when the world turned its back. You defended me when I had no right to expect it. You saw me not as damaged goods, but as a person worth loving. I promise to stand with you, work beside you, and love you through whatever trials we face. By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana," Judge Harrison intoned, "I pronounce you man and wife." When Sam kissed his bride, someone in the crowd actually applauded, Jake Morrison, grinning broadly. But most sat in stony silence, their disapproval palpable. Outside the courthouse, they were immediately confronted by Marshal Bradley. "This isn't over, Mrs. McCarty. If Garrison pushes his claims, then we'll deal with it," Sam said firmly. "My wife has told the truth. If Garrison wants to pursue lies, he'll have to come here to do it, and I'll be waiting." Bradley studied them both, then touched his hat. "Fair enough. Congratulations on your marriage." He walked away, leaving them standing in the weak spring sunshine. "Mrs. McCarty," Ellie said wonderingly. "I have a new name. How does it feel?" "Like armor," she admitted. "Like protection I've never had before." They were loading the wagon when Reverend Watson approached, his wife hovering behind him. "Mr. McCarty, Mrs. McCarty," he said formally. "While I have concerns about the haste of this union, I want to offer our Christian fellowship." "Save it, Reverend," Sam cut him off. "Your wife made your fellowship clear inside. We don't need it." "Sam," Ellie placed a hand on his arm, then addressed the minister. "Thank you for the offer. Reverend, perhaps in time wounds can heal. For now, we need to get home." As they drove out of town, Ellie asked, "Do you think they'll ever accept us?" "Does it matter?" She considered this. "I suppose not, but it would be nice not to be a pariah forever. You're not a pariah. You're my wife. That's all that matters." That evening, back at the ranch. They sat before the fire as they had so many times before. But everything was different now. The simple gold band on Ellie's finger, purchased from the general store that morning, caught the firelight. "I have something for you," Sam said, producing a small leather pouch. "Wedding gift." Ellie opened it, gasping at the contents. It was Margaret's wedding ring, the one Sam had buried her in. No, this was different, he realized, looking closer. It was her mother's, Sam explained. "Margaret kept it in a box I couldn't bear to open until recently. I think she'd want you to have it, to keep it in the family." "Sam, I couldn't—" "Yes, you can. Ooh. You're my family now, Ellie. The only family I've got or want." She slipped the ring on her right hand, tears flowing freely. "I'll treasure it, always." They sat quietly for a while, the weight of the day settling around them. Then Ellie asked, "What happens now? With Garrison? With the town?" "We live our lives," Sam said simply. "We work the ranch, raise cattle, face whatever comes, together." "Together," she agreed, leaning into his warmth. Outside, night was falling over the Montana landscape. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear sky. In the morning, there would be work, fences to mend, cattle to tend, a life to build. But tonight, they had this, the fire, each other, and the promise of all the tomorrows to come. "No more whiskey?" Ellie asked, noticing the bottle still sitting unopened on the shelf. Sam pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Don't need it anymore. Got something better to keep me warm." She smiled against his chest. "The whiskey don't warm you anymore. Only you do," he confirmed, completing their private litany. In the distance, a wolf howled. Not a threat, just a wild creature calling to its mate across the vast darkness. Sam understood the feeling. He'd been alone so long he'd forgotten what it meant to belong to someone, to have someone belong to him. Now he knew again, and no amount of town gossip or legal threats could take that away. They'd found each other against all odds, two damaged souls creating something whole. It was more than he'd dared hope for, more than he probably deserved, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Spring had come to the ranch, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings. The snow had melted, revealing green grass that the cattle attacked with enthusiasm after the long winter. Sam watched Ellie working in the garden she'd started, her sleeves rolled up, dirt smudging her cheek. She'd never looked more beautiful to him. It had been 2 months since their marriage, 2 months of building a life together despite the cold shoulders in town. Some folks had warmed to them. Jake Morrison and his wife had even come for Sunday dinner, but others, like the Watsons, maintained their icy disapproval. Sam was repairing a fence when he saw the rider approaching. His hand went automatically to his sidearm before recognizing the familiar figure of Doc Palmer. "Sam!" The doctor's usually calm face showed urgency. "Need your help. Bad situation in town." "What's happened?" "Stage got robbed yesterday, about 10 miles out. Driver's dead, passengers wounded. We've got more hurt folks than I can handle alone." Doc hesitated. "I know Ellie has some healing knowledge." Sam was already heading for the house. "We'll both come." He found Ellie hanging laundry, humming softly. The simple domesticity of it made his heart clench. How long had it been since this ranch had known such peaceful moments? "Ellie, Doc needs our help. Stage robbery. People hurt." She didn't hesitate, already pulling off her apron. "I'll get the medical supplies." The ride to town was swift and grim. Doc filled them in on the way, 5 passengers, including a woman and child. The outlaws had been brutal, shooting anyone who resisted. The scene at Doc's office was chaos. Wounded people lay on every available surface, their groans filling the air. Sam saw several townspeople trying to help, including, surprisingly, Mrs. Watson. "Thank God," Doc said. "Ellie, I need you to help with the woman and child. Sam, help me with this man. Bullet still in his shoulder." For the next several hours, they worked without rest. Ellie moved with quiet efficiency, cleaning wounds, comforting the frightened, her steady presence calming even the most distressed. Sam watched her tend to a young boy, maybe 6 years old, with a gash on his forehead. "There now," she murmured. "Brave boys get better faster. Did you know that?" The child nodded solemnly, tears drying as she worked. Mrs. Watson, working nearby, watched this interaction with an unreadable expression. When she spoke, her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. "You've done this before." "My father taught me," Ellie replied, not looking up from her work. "Said healing hands were God's gift, meant to be used." "The boy's mother," Mrs. Watson asked quietly. "Didn't make it," Ellie said simply. "He doesn't know yet." The two women exchanged a look of understanding that transcended their previous animosity. Some things were bigger than town gossip. As the immediate crisis passed, Sam found himself helping move the deceased to the undertakers. 3 souls lost to senseless violence. The boy's mother, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25, looked peaceful despite the violent nature of her death. "Martha Jennings," the undertaker said softly. "Husband died last winter. She was heading to California to live with her sister. The boy, we'll figure something out," Sam said gruffly. The thought of the child, orphaned and alone, hit too close to home. Back at Doc's office, he found Ellie sitting with the boy, Timothy. They'd learned. She was telling him a story, her voice soft and soothing. The child had curled against her, seeking comfort in her maternal presence. "Mrs. McCarty," Doc Palmer approached, looking exhausted. "You've been a godsend today. Don't know how I'd have managed without you both." Several townspeople murmured agreement. Even those who'd been coldest toward Ellie seemed to be reconsidering their stance. Reverend Watson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've been hasty in our judgments. Christians should recognize good works when they see them." His wife nodded slowly. "The boy," she said to Ellie. "What will happen to him?" "His mother mentioned a sister in California," Ellie said, "but reaching her, making arrangements, it will take time. He'll need somewhere to stay." "Mrs. Watson said, then seemed to steel herself. "Unless, would you and Mr. McCarty consider—" Ellie looked at Sam, a question in her eyes. He knew what she was thinking. They'd only just started their life together, and taking on a traumatized child was no small thing. But he also saw the longing there, the maternal instinct she'd probably thought buried. "We have room," Sam said simply. The relief on the boy's face when they explained he'd be staying with them was heartbreaking. He clung to Ellie's hand as they prepared to leave. "Just until we can contact your aunt," Ellie told him gently. "But you'll be safe with us." As they loaded into the wagon, Mrs. Watson approached one more time. "Mrs. McCarty," she said formally. Then her stern facade cracked slightly. "Ellie, I owe you an apology. I judged without truly seeing. That was wrong of me." Ellie studied the older woman's face, then extended her hand. "We all make mistakes. Mrs. Watson, what matters is what we do next." The handshake was brief but significant. Not quite friendship, but no longer open hostility. The ride home was quiet. Timothy dozed between them, exhausted by trauma and grief. Sam reached over to squeeze Ellie's shoulder. "You were amazing today," he said softly, "like you were born to heal." "I'd forgotten," she admitted. "How good it feels to help, to be useful beyond just cooking and cleaning." She looked down at the sleeping child. "Do you think we're doing right, taking him in?" "I think we're doing the only thing decent people could do." That night, after settling Timothy in the small room off the kitchen, Sam and Ellie sat by their fire. The weight of the day's events pressed down on them. "Those outlaws are still out there," Ellie said quietly. "What if they come here?" "Then we'll be ready," Sam replied. "But I don't think they will. Men like that prey on the vulnerable. They know this ranch isn't easy pickings anymore. Because of what happened before. Because word spreads. They know you can shoot, that I'll fight, that we have neighbors who'll come if called." He pulled her close. "We're not alone anymore. Ellie, either of us." She was quiet for a moment. "The boy's mother. She was so young. It could have been me, if you hadn't." "But it wasn't," Sam said firmly. You're here. You're safe. We're together. I want to help him, Ellie said suddenly. Timothy, not just until his aunt comes, but really help him, the way someone should have helped me when I was lost and alone. Then we will. A small sound from the kitchen made them both turn. Timothy stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. I had a bad dream, he whispered. About Mama. Without hesitation, Ellie opened her arms. The boy ran to her, burying his face against her shoulder. She held him, rocking gently, murmuring comfort. Sam watched them, his wife and this broken child, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what Margaret had wanted, what they'd tried so hard to have. Not like this, not born from tragedy, but family nonetheless. It's all right, Ellie was saying. Cry all you need to. We're here. You're not alone. Over the boy's head, her eyes met Sam's. In them, he saw reflected his own thoughts. This was more than they'd bargained for, more complicated than their simple plan to build a quiet life together. But it was also right. Deeply, fundamentally right. Come on, Sam said gruffly. Standing. Let's all sit by the fire for a bit. I'll tell you about the time I saw a bear try to steal honey from a beehive. Funniest thing you ever saw. As he spun the tale, embellishing for the child's benefit, Sam felt the rightness of this moment. 3 broken people, brought together by circumstances beyond their control, forming something new, not replacing what was lost. Nothing could do that, but building something worth having nonetheless. Outside, the Montana night was vast and full of dangers. But inside, warmed by the fire and each other, they were safe. They were home. They were family. Sam? Timothy's small voice interrupted the story. Miss Ellie says you'll keep me safe. Is that true? Sam met the boy's solemn eyes. That's a promise. Son, both of us will. The boy nodded, satisfied, and leaned back against Ellie. Within minutes, he was asleep again, trusting in their protection. We should put him to bed, Ellie whispered. In a minute, Sam said. This is nice. And it was. Different from what either of them had imagined. More than they dared hope for. But nice. More than nice. It was the beginning of something new. Summer had fully arrived in Montana, painting the landscape in shades of gold and green. The ranch thrived under Ellie's care. The garden burst with vegetables. The chicken coop Sam had built housed a dozen laying hens, and even the cattle seemed healthier. Timothy had been with them 3 months now, his aunt having written that she couldn't take him until fall when her own circumstances improved. The boy had bloomed under their care, the haunted look fading from his eyes. He followed Sam around the ranch like a shadow, learning to mend fences and tend cattle. In the evenings, Ellie taught him his letters, patient with his struggles. Sam, the boy called out now, running from the barn. Come quick, Buttercup's having her calf. Sam dropped his hammer and hurried after him. Sure enough, their best milk cow was in labor. He'd been watching her for days, knowing her time was near. Easy, girl, Sam murmured, checking her progress. Ellie! Need you! She appeared quickly, sleeves already rolled up. Together, they worked through the delivery, Timothy watching wide-eyed as new life entered the world. It's a girl, Ellie announced as the calf struggled to its feet. A beautiful little heifer. Can I name her? Timothy asked eagerly. Course you can. Sam ruffled the boy's hair. What'll it be? Timothy thought seriously. Hope, 'cause that's what you and Miss Ellie gave me. Ellie turned away, wiping her eyes. Sam cleared his throat roughly. Even after 3 months, the boy's simple gratitude could still undo them both. Later, as they washed up for supper, a rider approached. Sam recognized him. Charlie Banks from the telegraph office. Got a wire for you. Mr. McCarty, Charlie said, handing over the paper. From California. Sam's heart sank. Timothy's aunt, finally ready to claim him. He paid Charlie and went inside, where Ellie was setting the table. What is it? She saw his face and stilled. He handed her the telegram. She read it slowly, her expression cycling through emotions. Relief, sadness, something that might have been grief. "Next month," she said quietly. "She'll send money for his passage." They both looked at Timothy, who was outside playing with the barn cats, his laughter carrying through the window. "We knew this was temporary," Sam said. "I know." Ellie's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she folded the telegram. "I know." That evening, after Timothy was in bed, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The routine had become precious. These quiet moments when the day's work was done, when they could just be together. "We have to tell him," Ellie said. "Tomorrow. Let him have tonight." She leaned against Sam's shoulder. "I didn't expect it to hurt this much, knowing he has to leave. He belongs with family." "What are we then?" The question hung between them, heavy with longing. Sam pulled her closer. "We're the people who kept him safe when he needed it. That matters too." The next weeks passed too quickly. They told Timothy about his aunt, watched him struggle with excitement at having family and sadness at leaving the only home he'd known since losing his mother. The night before his departure, Ellie tucked him in one last time. "Will you forget me?" the boy asked, fear in his young voice. "Never," Ellie promised fiercely. "You'll always have a place here, Timothy. Always. You promise?" "I promise." Sam appeared in the doorway. "And promises mean something out here. Son, don't forget that." The morning of departure dawned clear and bright. They loaded into the wagon for the trip to town. Timothy clutched between them. He wore the new clothes Ellie had made, looked every inch the proper boy heading to a new life. At the stage station, a small crowd had gathered to see him off. Word had spread about the orphan boy the McCartys had taken in, and even some who'd been coldest toward them came to wish him well. Mrs. Watson pressed a wrapped package into Timothy's hands. "Cookies for your journey," she said gruffly. To Ellie, she added quietly, "You did a good thing, both of you." When the stage arrived, Sam lifted Timothy up to the driver. The boy's courage held until the last moment, then crumbled. "I don't want to go." He reached for them. "Please, can I stay? I'll be good. I promise." Ellie's composure broke. She pulled him down for one last fierce hug. "You are good," she whispered. "The best boy anyone could ask for. Your aunt is lucky to have you." "Write to us," Sam said roughly, pressing a piece of paper with their address into the boy's pocket. "Let us know you're all right." "I will," Timothy promised through his tears. "I'll write every week." The driver, not unkindly, said it was time. They watched the stage pull away. Timothy's face pressed to the window until they could no longer see him. Ellie stood frozen, tears streaming. Sam wrapped his arms around her, and she broke completely, sobbing against his chest. Around them, the townspeople dispersed quietly, respectfully, leaving them to their grief. "Come on," Sam said finally. "Let's go home." The ride back was silent. The ranch, when they reached it, seemed too quiet. Timothy's absence was a physical thing, filling every corner. That night, for the first time in months, Sam found himself reaching for the whiskey, but Ellie's hand stopped him. "Don't," she said softly. "Not that way. It hurts," he admitted. "Didn't expect it to hurt this bad." "I know." She took his hands. "But we faced it together. That's what matters." They sat by the fire, the empty chair where Timothy used to curl up, a constant reminder. Then Ellie spoke. So quietly, Sam almost missed it. "I want a child. Sam, our own child." He looked at her, seeing the naked longing in her eyes. "Ellie, I know we haven't been married long. I know there are no guarantees. But seeing you with Timothy, having him here," she took a shaky breath, "I want to try." Sam thought of Margaret, of the babies they'd lost, of the dream that had died with her. Then he thought of Ellie, strong, capable Ellie, who'd brought light back into his world. "All right," he said simply. "We'll try." Fall arrived with its familiar rhythms. They heard from Timothy. His aunt was kind. He was in school. He missed them terribly, but was adjusting. Each letter was treasured, read and reread. One cold morning, Ellie emerged from the bedroom with an odd expression. Sam, pulling on his boots, looked up concerned. "You all right?" She sat beside him slowly, taking his hands. "Sam, I think I'm with child." The world stopped. Sam stared at her, unable to speak. Fear and joy warred in his chest, memories of Margaret's losses battling with hope for this new chance. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I've been sick in the mornings." And she placed his hand on her still flat belly. "I just know. We'll get Doc Palmer. Make certain you have the best care. I won't lose you too. I can't." "Sam." Ellie cupped his face. "I'm not Margaret. This isn't the same. We're going to be fine." He pulled her close, breathing in her scent, lavender soap and sunshine. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Our baby." She confirmed. Winter came early that year, but inside the McCarty cabin, warmth prevailed. Ellie grew round with child, glowing with health despite Sam's constant worrying. The townspeople, even the holdouts, had finally accepted them. Nothing like shared tragedy and witnessed compassion to change hearts. On a February night, with snow falling soft outside, Ellie's time came. Doc Palmer attended, calm and competent, while Sam wore grooves in the floor with his pacing. "It's a girl," Doc announced after what seemed like eternity. "Healthy and perfect." Sam was allowed in to find Ellie propped in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your daughter," she said, offering the baby. Sam took her with shaking hands. The infant was perfect. Tiny fingers, rosebud mouth, a shock of dark hair like her mother's. When she opened her eyes, they were gray like Ellie's, but held something of Margaret too, as if both women who'd shaped his life had contributed to this miracle. "What should we name her?" Ellie asked. Sam thought of all they'd been through, the storms weathered, the love found, the family built from broken pieces. "Grace," he said finally. "Grace Margaret McCarty." "Perfect," Ellie murmured, that night as his wife and daughter slept. Sam sat by the fire one last time with his whiskey bottle. He held it up to the light, remembering all the nights it had been his only companion. Then, with deliberate ceremony, he poured it out the window into the snow. "Don't need you anymore, old friend," he said quietly. From the bedroom came a soft cry, followed by Ellie's gentle murmuring. Sam smiled and went to join his family. Outside, the Montana winter raged on. But inside their cabin, love had built walls stronger than any storm. "The whiskey don't warm me anymore," he whispered, settling beside Ellie and baby Grace. "Only you do, both of you." And in that moment, with his world complete in his arms, Sam McCarty knew that sometimes the greatest treasures came not from what we planned, but from what we found along the way. The lonely rancher who'd once sat by his fire with only ghosts for company now had a future bright with promise. Life, he'd learned, had a way of surprising you if you were brave enough to let it. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of Sam and Ellie finding love against all odds in the Montana frontier, don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic stories of romance and redemption in the American West. Share your thoughts about their journey in the comments. I read every single one.